G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff. The mask is off. The Femcels are on the attack, and together with the Misandrists, they want to destroy men. Whoops, pardon me. So South Korean men don't have a choice. They have to fight back. They have a slogan, I don't want to go to jail. See, feminists, after the... I should catch you up a little bit. See, South Korea was bitterly divided. Sexual assaults on the rise during COVID, allegedly, led to a division in society and the rise of the 4B movement. Now, Yoon Suk Yeol, young, up-and-coming conservative, well, not so young, united various patriots in South Korea against the feminists and saw a threat to Korean society. He tried to act and they impeached him. The media lied. His own party sold him out. Why? Because their wives threatened to leave them. Their wives threatened to withhold sex. See, we are not being told the truth about Yoon Suk Yeol, how his wife and how many women in the conservative movement in Korea sold him out. See, he only won the election by 0.4%, and so many men in Korea fell by the wayside. So new laws were passed. Korean men have to deal with every day. They could go to jail for the male gaze. For, any accusation of sexual assault will get them fired. Men, however, being competitive and ultimately more logical, more methodical, they started fighting back. So if a feminist comes after you, they hit them. See, going to jail for assault, it's not 10 years for a sexual assault. It could be a misdemeanor, and most men don't even go to jail. Six months suspended sentence. Don't come near her again. She runs away. She doesn't know what to do. Right now, the Femcel movement, they're being very controversial. They walk around the office with no bra on. They sit on desks, revealing themselves. They're trying anything to provoke men, and it's not working. Men are literally fighting back. Every time they see a feminist, they clock in, folks. They clock in. And you may not like their tactics, but in 2018, 77% of South Korean men under 30 were supportive of the Me Too movement. This shifted Korean politics to the left. But by 2021, this number was down to 29%. Why? Well, Me Too saw a whole bunch of new sexual harassment laws, and suddenly sexual harassment cases were everywhere. Men were being ruined. The right came to power. Now, briefly, it was put to a halt, but then believe it or not, foreign interference, predominantly from The Guardian, led by an Indian man, a cuck by the name of Raphael Rashid, organized a global movement of feminists, and in the city of Jeonju, using the alleged rape of a woman, organized protests. Now, this led to counter-protests, and on the evening of the 23rd, Shi-hu was working a late-night shift on the shelf when she was turned to ask, and allegedly, she was bumped into, and allegedly claimed that a young man aggressively was knocking items off the shelf. He might have been drunk, he might have tripped, whatever. She just said, "I'm sewing you to the bones right now, don't touch me." Situation escalated. She cried for help. What happened? He took a phone, put it in the store's microwave. She tried to stop him. She grabbed her by the collar, dragged her several meters, and slammed her into the shelves. This was a brutal assault. Even though repeatedly says never hit women, but feminists deserve to be beaten. And when an older man tried to heal, he demanded, "Why aren't you helping your fellow man?" He announced that he's part of a men's right movement, and when called for a male officer to cuff him. He waited for the police, by the way. He didn't run. He just basically stood in court and said, "I did not want to go to jail. She accused me of sexual assault," and this divided Korea so much that even now, right, he was facing a 3-year prison sentence, but Korea was facing such a wave of protests. They suspended his sentence, and it has become a pitched battle where Gen Zs and millennials are now bitterly at war with each other. Millennial women, supported by beta cucks, but Gen Zs, they're not taking the shit. But this is why they keep talking about gangs and toxic masculinity. They're trying to shame Korea to their knees. But Trump, he said it's an internal affair and is leaving it alone for now. But in the world of gender politics, there is no middle ground. You will come under fire from Oxford, The Guardian, and all the other British establishment. But America won't turn around and say, "Well, we won't stand for Russian interference, so why should we have British interference or European interference?" Look at Ukraine, look at Korea. All you see is foreign interference. If you strip away the layers, look at all the pro-Ukrainians. They're all beta cucks or feminists or eco-nuts. They know war destroys society. They're trying to destroy society. But it's called right-wing populism, the rise of young men in Korea. See, young men in Korea, most Koreans are not political. They vote on family lines. If you work for one of the big families in Korea, you vote for a conservative government. It's your job. It's your duty. You are pretty much in a sphere where you cannot have thoughts and work at the same time for a company and have left-wing ideology. See, it's all right when a shipbuilder or some unionist in a factory, but for most young men, you do not have the social economic luxury of communism, right? You know the threat. You've seen the threat. You know what communism is. Korean men meet communist defectors. They learn everything about communism. They stand on the front lines of their country and stare across at men who are prepared to murder them because they get a bowl of rice extra a day for basically preparing to. But South Korea in 2022 was a photo finish with only 247 votes, mostly young men. Young men, 63% voted in Gen Z for a conservative, anti-feminist. But they created a problem. See, in Korea, when the virus of unknown of unknown origins and specifications hit, it created a new anxiety across young men who now had no job, no means of paying the rent, and suddenly found themselves without girlfriends. See, in Korea, it used to be very easy for men to get a girlfriend. It was almost guaranteed that if you had a job, you got a girlfriend. COVID and saw the rise of feminism, which doubled because it was also already on the rise due to Me Too. But the paranoid delusions of Me Too were mostly performative theatre. It was actually organised mostly around Korean prostitutes who illegally, by the way, work the streets selling comfort. They call themselves comfort girls. They sell comfort, right? They do not technically sell sex, and a lot of them actually do not perform sexual acts. They merely comfort young men for a small amount of money. Well, these young men couldn't go out during COVID, and they suddenly realised, all the hug and love and all the affection of their girlfriends went away. They couldn't turn to comfort women. They couldn't go to bars and have women serve them anymore. Men actually were forced to go their own way, and they suddenly realised that they didn't need a woman. That they suddenly found that it's enjoyable to cook your own meal. That you didn't need these fancy meals. You didn't need to sit down and hug a woman to make up for your miserable days. You didn't have to watch some boring Korean drama and listen to some woman's sob story. You could watch sports again. You could go out with your mates. You play video games. You actually found out you could go and participate in political rallies. See, once there were things that were still allowed under the restrictions, but see, because men and women weren't mixing, men could start sharing their stories and realize how many young Korean men are unloved by their mothers, and that they turn to prostitutes, most of them who are their mother's age or older. Some of them are even their mother's friends, by the way. Suddenly realizing that the social economic drive of Korea, which was rooted deeply in family and pretty much just basically pandering to the whims of Korean women, well, the highly competitive marketplace became even more competitive. Why? Because during COVID, we saw the rise of Temu. We saw the rise of foreign companies flooding into Korea to take advantage of the fact that many of Koreans' businesses were still old-style brick and mortar. And also you saw the decline of demand for electronics, with China flooding the world with cheaper electronics. Korea being cut out of supply lines. Orders for Korean shipping, which saw a lot of young men shifting from having to work in factories to now seeking low-paying office work, which was normally dominated by women. You now had Korean men learning to become secretaries, assistants. But suddenly, at first, the older generation of women saw these handsome young men, and they thought, we'll bring them in. My husband won't cheat on me with a man. Not when he's got me at home. So what happened? These old women forced their chobal or, basically the corporate conglomerate husbands to hire more young men as assistants. Now that these young men started to create a pyramid, and all the way down to Gen Z. Multiple generations were now back in contact with each other. Young men listening to old men and suddenly realizing the horror stories that they experienced in their youth is the same for generations of men having to seek comfort, that the only way to have a girlfriend was to have a job and pander to her needs. And now young men didn't know what to do with their money because they started to lead what was called a normal life. Instead of marrying, they were learning to cook. Instead of renting expensive apartments, they were renting smaller apartments. They were spending more time in video games. That's why you saw the resurgence in League of Legends. Hugely popular in Korea. And you saw a huge shift in social economic drivers, which to today, Korean men on average are 31% more productive than women. So companies were paying productivity bonuses to men, and suddenly realizing that they were walking in and their offices were still clean. These young men in their suits could learn, who were once rough young men in factories, are now adjusting to office life and regimenting office life as it was like in a factory, where there was no longer the long drawn out boring meetings. There were the efficient 5-minute let's go get 'em meetings. They didn't have to worry about tiptoeing about women. They could plan their day without discussing sexual harassment and workplace feelings and dealing with who was taking a sick day. All of a sudden, the so-called and women were complaining about declining incomes, because don't forget, there is no pay gender gap. So they come up with this new pay gender gap where they average the wages and say, oh look, 400,000 men earn this much and 400,000 women earn this much. There's a pay gap because the men earned more. Yeah, but they worked more hours. They never talk about, they always talk about the pay gap. They never talk about the skill gap or the productivity gap. And now that men are pretty much no longer acting like boys, titillated by the sight of their girlfriends in fancy clothes, they could go out and women would be standing, they'd see their former girlfriends trying to street corner foreigners. They suddenly realised that they were never loved by their girlfriends. So now, whenever a man feels the urge, he doesn't ask for a date. He doesn't ask for a marriage. He asks a woman if they want to make a baby together. And they sit down and he sits down with a schedule of how they're going to do it and how much he's willing to pay for it. And that's it. See, feminists turned everything transactional. And feminists, when they said Me Too, Korean men said, yes, we agree women should not be sexually assaulted. When Korean women said we deserve equal rights in the workplace, Korean men said we do not have a problem with women having equal rights in the first place. When women wanted equal pay, they said why not? 2 incomes is better than 1 in a household. See, men were thinking far too logically when women were asking for everything for the last 50 years. And Korean men, they thought, well, if we buy more women's clothes, we sell more women's clothes, more men will be working, more Koreans working, right? Korea was leading the way in textiles, shoes, and many other products post-war. Food. Korea was starting to outstrip Japan, except in the field of cars. But Korea had shipping. But Japan also had shipping. But Korea was losing in heavy industry to Japan. But Korea and Japan was starting to lose to China since the 90s. So it has been a slow decline for most countries. But now that young Korean men who are now awake to the fact that most of their girlfriends were Femcels, a lot of Korean men admitted that the only way they were pretty much extorted by their girlfriends, no sex before marriage, and they said, yep, fine, abstinence makes the heart grow fonder, but as soon as the wife had a baby and she got back in the workplace, there was no relationship, and soon after they were divorced. Divorce rate in Korea was like 60%. It went from almost nothing in 3 years to 60%. But then they started seeing American populism in 2016. And they paid attention. See, they don't want politicians. They don't want political parties. They want conservative men in power who will lead dispassionately, logically, and do the best for society, not for individualism. Now, it may sound like communism to you and me, right? But that's not how Korea sees it. To them, They see communism as the lack of private property and the lack of respect for private property and privacy, right? They do not see, right, countries as they do not see countries the way we do. Koreans believe Korea is a country of Koreans. Yes, I know they migrate to America. They don't have 100% that attitude. But I'm just saying, if you polled most Koreans, yeah, they would say Korea's for Korea. They don't want diversity. They don't want equity. There's a lot of things they don't want, but they do agree that society should benefit the whole, or at least the majority. But they do believe in the constitutional republic that America represents, and wish they had more of that for themselves. They want the labour market decentralised. They don't want to be born into positions and forced into positions, and only the rich have the luxury of being able to pick and choose what job they get. No, they believe that if a young person's qualified, that he should get the job. That women, right, only deserve a place in the workplace after they've fulfilled their duties, right? Korean believes in duties, right? Man duties to his family, but this is all now shattered. And MGTOW is spreading like, they call it populism, but we know what it means. And now they don't know what to do. Various institutes and think tanks are now trying to solve Korea. Why? Korea doesn't need to be solved. That's foreign interference. They believe that they are the losers in globalization. That around the world, men are the losers in globalization. Right? In India, Indian men, that's why Indian men are leaving India. Because they have a growing feminist movement. Modi may be gone next year to his feminist rivals. I'll do another study on India and feminism there soon, and the rise of Femcels there. But most Femcels are members of the LGBTQ plus movement, or the women's reproductive rights movement, or the communist movement, but they don't call it the communist movement in South Korea. I think they call it the Popular People's Movement or something. But 4B is a slogan. It is a collection of slogans used by various groups. That's why there is no 4B movement. It's a slogan. But remember, Orwell warned us about women and slogans. Now, you may see it as sexist, but Korea is a fertile ground for right-wing populism and a training ground for new ideas. We can learn so much from Korean men, how they deal with radical feminism, because you cannot be polite and apologize. To apologize is to admit guilt. To admit guilt means they can take you to court and send you to jail for 10 years for a sexual assault. Just for bumping into a girl. Well, 19-year-old, but they still consider 19 a girl, right? So now you know why why Biden helped oust Yoon Suk Yeol. Why Biden and others, they are... Joe Biden is Jill Biden's bitch. Barack Obama is Michelle Obama's bitch. Bill Clinton, probably the first cuck president, although he tried to fight back. He tried to humiliate his wife. It didn't work. He ended up being humiliated by her again and again. Remember, folks, Chelsea admitted she sold her body to a New York banker for $10 million and an apartment for her and her mother. why no one on the right should support Ukraine. No one on the right should support the globalist movement. Men are looking at what? 4-hour travel on average, right? They are looking at solid 8.5-hour workdays on average. Half your weekend's gone. Now, these cucks are claiming that in male culture you can't speak up. You have to, that males take out their frustration on women. That while on the surface South Korea appears to be an ultra-modern society, it is with pop culture and cutting-edge technology. Beneath this veneer is a widening gender divide, and is seen as a threat to civilization itself by the economic cooperation and development, who said they fought for years to get Korean women educated but now Korea has the largest gender pay gap, the least employment for women, and the least upward mobility for women. They claim that a 23-year-old woman was brutally murdered based solely on rhetoric by Yoon Suk Yeol. Digital targeting of women. Now, I can attest to this, that women are targeted, predominantly by Muslim men, by the way, who send dick pics. There's, of course, an epidemic of spy cams and revenge porn. Hey, in Korean society, photo fetish is a real thing. They're fetish shaming. They're fetish shaming men, right? They're trying to... But the thing is, women created the male feminist in the 90s. They called it metrosexual. And what they do with all these white male heterosexuals, they turned them into LGBTQ and started calling them trans, didn't they? Started getting men to put on makeup and dresses. And then when that wasn't enough, they started getting men to have sex with each other and calling it and cuddling and saying how it was enlightening and progressive. See, they're taking advantage of these aging globalists. By the way, most of these aging globalists are men, are telling women how to be women and then getting women to tell men how to be men, right? Raphael Rashid does not live the lifestyle that he advocates. He is attacking Westerners from the privilege of being a colonizer in England. But Korea, what right has Rashid got to tell Koreans how to live? But I don't, and no one else does. Only Rashid and the World Economic Forum. Of course, The Guardian, the spokesperson for British intelligence. British intelligence? That's an oxymoron these days. But in South Korea, saying I support feminism can lose you your job, get attacked by groups of men. But this, of course, is a lowest common denominator statement by the mainstream media. There is far more context than I have been able to provide in this short statement. But it is very hard to research because, one, I don't speak Korean, and two, Korean men are not openly going around making TikTok videos saying how they clocked out a feminist. No. They just quietly share amongst themselves how they deal with radical feminism. And you have to make a choice between, if a radical feminist targets you and you do not have friends, you're in trouble. But in Korea, men are helping each other. MGTOW can learn from this and realize male lawyers, male advocates, male groups actually not going to, Instead of a man going to court and a male advocate telling him a man how to make a plea deal, plead down sexual assault to sexual misdemeanor and pay a huge fine and go to jail for a year. No. They're telling men, right? If you do not want to go to jail and you are confronted by a radical feminist, right? If you have to get away. If you see a woman whose misdemeanor is problematic, you recognize it or feel that there's a problem, never be alone with a woman. All right? See, one of the things that a lot of Koreans are talking about is how if they could get Trump, they can get anybody. See, most men in Korea believe Trump was framed. More people in Korea believe Trump was framed than in America. A lot of Korean men say if they saw E. Jean Carroll, they'd clock her out. They'd never be allowed themselves to be alone with either anybody like E. Jean Carroll or any left-wing woman, especially someone like Stormy Daniels. South Korean men are realizing that you cannot be led around by a septum ring. Right? You see a septum ring, you see earrings, you see lots of makeup, power shoulders. They teach each other all the signs of a feminist, the brands they use, the makeup, the style of clothing and hair, the way they speak. They are teaching each other to survive feminism. To have friends. Because in Korea, if you ask a woman out more than 3 times, you can go to jail. So they don't ask a woman out. They don't show sexual interest in a woman. And in the workplace, they will get a group of men together and they'll find fault with everything she does. And just talk about it all day long. Not by name. Just say, that person who did this. You remember that person, that time when they spilt the ink? And they'll be so specific that that person knows they're being talked about, but can't do anything because they're recording everything and their name is never mentioned once. They use the letter of the law against feminism. When confronted by a radical feminist and accusations of sexual assault, they will, if they bump into or anything, and the woman starts screaming or something, bang, they clock her out, and wait for the police. They'll kneel and put their hands on their head. They'll even state, she attacked me first. She provoked me. She attacked me. She hit me first. She bumped into me and wouldn't apologize. She refuses to accept responsibility. They have everything so running and smoothly, but because it's mostly all in Korean, I can only get you what I can find and translate, because most search engines are in the West are so pro-feminist, remember these, I'm telling you, all these Indians, they're coming to the West and they're pushing feminism, Western feminism. Soon, it's going to backfire. It's backfiring on them, though, right? All these Indian cucks, they're coming home to find their wives with black men. Now they don't know what to do. I'm telling you, India is in a panic right now. But I'm telling you right now, there is more to the Young Suk your story, that it was an orchestrated coup backed by the American Democrats and the British. He's the shortest serving elected president. He's only 64, which is young for a Korean politician, apparently. I don't know how true that is. But Me Too. Yeah, watch out. Because if you keep pushing radical feminism, more and more people will take notice of. Oh, I'm not advocating for violence. I am merely reporting what's happening. Right? That MGTOW is changing and is going to be divided. Because to those living under the domination of radical feminists, they don't have the luxury of walking away. In Japan, it's still, I don't want to lose my job. But in Korea, it's, I don't want to go to jail. It's a choice. It's a choice that is going to be thrust only onto a small minority. But the rest of us have to stand firm with the brotherhood. We kick out the cucks. We have to, we give people a chance, I think, of course. But ultimately, we have to decide. We have to protect the rights and dignity of men. There is no future without children. Society is collapsing. And this has happened before. We know now why societies collapse, why civilizations collapse. When women get bored, when women start exercising power beyond assistant to their man, right? When we start having queens come into power, you know, when we had Fall of Rome, well, it started with the Cleopatra, didn't it? Getting Mark Antony and Caesar to fight each other for her. The more we know throughout history, Queen Elizabeth I, war in Spain, more wars under queens than under kings, and there are far fewer queens. China, 1,600 years of war, often overseen by women, forcing their general husbands to prove themselves. Prove yourself in battle, comrade. How did communists take over China? They marched 1 million women on Beijing. The Imperial Guard wouldn't fight them because they were women. They could have wiped them out easily. China lies how it came to power, but Korea, however, South Korea does not have a misogyny problem. It has a misandrist problem. And it's driven by Femcels, women who want a genocide society. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And please support the channel. You can support the channel on Ko-Fi, Patreon. Buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And I really hope I've enlightened you, not just to the coup in Korea, but the struggles that Korean men face and maybe coming to Japan, maybe coming to America. Radical feminism, though, right now is still in its infancy, but the 4B movement, it's a slogan, and it will spread. We've already seen it today. Some of you out there were with me on Outlaw MGTOW when we discussed this on his stream. So yes, it's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So look at Europe under Ursula von der Leyen. Ursula always lying, I call her. So yeah, you have been warned. I'm not asking you to become a radical freedom fighter. I'm just asking you to watch out for your fellow man. And when push comes to shove, defend your fellow man. And that you have to understand that we have to change the law to get, because women are so used to privilege, they think any privilege, whether it's abortion or free healthcare, they believe they're entitled to free education, free healthcare. They think they're entitled to half of all jobs. They're entitled to the same pay as you, even though they do less work. No, they are so used to privilege. They're so used that they've been put on a pedestal for so long, they don't know better. But the Femcel does. They are manipulating society to destroy it. And maybe South Korea will teach us a lesson or two on how to get through radical feminism and come out the other side stronger, better, smarter, and in charge of our lives, and no longer a piggy bank for the Femcel. Bye for now.